Probably. All right. So please figure out ways to take care of yourself in this process, because while the material may not seem 100% relevant to work, this is actually probably one of the most important trainings you will have. For those of you that are actually paid at Higher Ground, you've heard me say this. There's only 3 real reasons you will get terminated at Higher Ground, and it's usually around 1, you put the company in danger, 2, you did something unethical, or 3, you're not willing to grow. All our other trainings are really more about growth. This training hits number 1 and number 2. So if you don't pay attention to this, you can easily put the organization in danger, especially if you are in different school sites. And also, this almost any violation in this part automatically falls under the second category, which is you probably did something unethical. We're doing this training today because I'm assuming everyone can read and has read the policies and procedures. I'm not going to bore you with the details of the way training like this normally goes in other companies, where you go to the policy, you read through it together. That's not what we are going to do today. Instead, we are going to figure out some more proactive stuff that we can do to talk about this. All right, is everyone pretty clear with that? All right, from an objective perspective, we just really have simple objectives. The first one is give you guys a clear understanding of what not to do from an ethical and professional standard. All right, it's probably the only time I will say the what not to do instead of what to do. All right, so this is really, really important that we get context of that. That's the first one. Things to not do. The second part is basically things you should avoid. All right, it's not necessarily not do, but definitely avoid. Definitely avoid. These are definitely things that you should probably avoid doing. Especially in our organization where a lot of people hang out, friends, family. The second part becomes really, really important. And finally, number 3, our third objective for the day is give you all a baseline understanding of how to represent our organization in front of other people. So that's the professionalism. All right, are we pretty clear on those 3 things?
Yeah.
All right, so before we get started, somebody tell me when you hear the word HR, what comes in your head? And Hans. Toby from The Office. Yes. All right, what else? Rules. What else? Performance. Ways to improve performance. What else?
There was like workplace videos, like appropriate conduct at work.
Appropriate conduct at work, long, boring training with videos that you have to watch. If you've ever been to Simpatico Relias training, you know, they have one specifically for that. What else? What else do you guys think of when you hear the word HR? Cultural competency stuff, right? Very important. All right, when you hear the word ethics and professionalism, what do you guys think of? Standards. Standards of conduct. What else?
Dress code.
Dress code. Yeah. Dress code. What else?
Morality.
A little bit of morality. Sometimes that gets mixed into that, especially if it's not a work environment setting. What else? What else is ethics and professionalism? Boundaries. Yes. All right, and so that's where I kind of want to start this off, is actually on that word, boundaries. Everything that we will discuss today will be really based on professional boundaries. And like I said, the problem that we have at our organization, it's our strength and our weakness. It's one of the things that make us work, but also our biggest risk is we are extremely close as staff members. And so sometimes those boundaries get skewed. Now when we talk about boundaries, we're going to talk about 3 different types of boundaries. Right, there's no slides for this. A lot of this will be conversational. The first type of boundary is boundary between you and members. What does that mean when I say members? Kids, who else is included in that? Parents, high school volunteers. All right? So when I say boundaries between you and members, it's basically, think of it this way, anyone who takes advantage of our services. All right? A teacher may end up becoming our member, for example, if they're attending our training, right, that we're providing for the school. They become a boundary between you and the member. All right? Although traditionally they won't play that role. But the moment a person is taking advantage of a higher ground service, they are considered a member. Second type of boundary is between you and your peers. Who are your peers? Your coworkers. Everyone in this room and those that are not in this room. Right? Those have a completely different set of boundaries. Alright, and then finally, the third type of boundary we're going to talk about is between you and the community. I don't think we need to explain what that is. Alright, these are people that don't fall under members, don't fall under co-workers, but are definitely involved and active at higher ground. Everybody here, and if you haven't, please make sure that you do, and we would have issues. Everybody here should have received a copy of the Higher Ground Policies and Procedures Manual. Anybody who did not? Very good. And everybody should have signed a paper that says you what? You read and understood it. And I'm not going to ask if you actually read it, but I am going to ask that everybody did sign that, correct? Alright, so that takes care of all the legal pieces of this matter. Alright, so things that are important to remember. Let's start with your ethics and standards of conduct between you and students. Most important thing to remember is that unfortunately, in cases where you get accused by a kid, you are, even though it's not by law, but by social standard, you are guilty until proven innocent. I want to be very clear about that. If a student were to accuse anybody here in a school setting or at the work setting, please understand that even though by law you are innocent until proven guilty, by society standards, you are guilty until proven innocent. Why does that matter so much? You need to make sure you ensure that you're creating a safe space. What else? Why does that matter?
Because if you got in a one-on-one situation and there's nobody else to observe it, and it's your word versus their word, and there's no way to prove that you didn't do that.
Because you want to prevent all possible instances of any appearance of any kind of misconduct, unethical behavior, or not professional behavior between you and a student. That is regardless of the setting, even if you're at the school, here at Higher Ground, even outside the grounds of Higher Ground. It is extremely important that you prevent situations from happening. Alright, so let's have an open discussion. What are some risky situations that are sometimes inevitable, you can't avoid them, that happens between you and students, whether you're in school or here? Okay. Hugging. That is a normal, daily interaction for some between student and another adult. What else? Or just common events, inevitable ones. Doesn't have to happen daily, but you know it happens. Steven. Nicknames. Alright? You want to be really careful giving nicknames to any kid. Calling them honey. Calling them dear. Doesn't matter if it's a cultural thing. I'm going to be very straight up with you right now. Alright? Calling them whatever. Baby, angel, sweetheart. It may sound innocent, It may even sound like endearment. Alright, but again, things to avoid. Alright, why do you need to avoid those? It's all a matter of interpretation. Okay, the adult, the parent may be okay with it. The kid might even be okay with it. A visitor comes, another teacher comes, a person comes, and they hear that, may not be so okay with it. Again, we're not going to say don't do it. We're going to say avoid it, right? And again, remember the rule. You are guilty until proven innocent. All you need is one parent, one person to hear that you're calling someone, a high school student, sweetheart, dear, all right, before you're getting accused of something bigger. Especially those of you that work with high school students and you're not far off from their age. Right? That becomes even bigger. There's another danger to it.
Just conversations in general.
What about labels and nicknames that make conversations in general risky?
Because like something might be like culturally appropriate for a group of people, or you know, it might be like
Because you don't know if the nickname you're giving might be culturally appropriate for your setting and what you're used to, but for that kid or the circle you're in, it's completely inappropriate. There's another danger.
I would say grooming is the one, like, it can be often perceived as part of the process of grooming child, which is like very dangerous.
There is
Maybe when you think that, but it could be that for the kid.
for the kid. The kid may interpret this as something completely different, and it's not just from a grooming perspective. Especially, again, we work with kids that are sometimes close to our age. All right? A term of endearment to them, to you, might just be something you call everyone, but to that kid, they may see that as, oh, I must be special. I have a nickname. This must be something between just me and Mr. So-and-so. He must like me. All right? So again, especially if you work the front office, especially if you're answering phones, my van driver, there's only one right now in this training, but especially if you are in that role where you are greeting kids on a daily basis, you really need to avoid nicknames. Any kind of nicknames, any kind of label, any kind of term of endearment. Like I said, it may sound innocent to you, but it's not that innocent to everyone. Alright, so we mentioned hugs, we mentioned nicknames. What else are some inevitable things that happen in the course of interacting with kids that can be risky when it comes to your boundaries? Compliments. You want to be careful how you give compliments. As a general rule, this doesn't just apply with kids. This is a boundary you need to observe with kids, peers, and community members. As a general rule, you don't want to give compliments about appearance. I'll say that again. As a general rule, you don't want to give compliments about a person's appearance. Alright? Again, it's not you're going to get fired if you do it, but do remember what I said at the beginning. You are proven guilty. You are guilty until proven innocent. Okay, I'm going to give you a real life story. We had a volunteer who was pretty much just moved to the United States, maybe 2-3 years in, from a very, very different culture. Coaching boxing. Some of the people know who this is. He's not with us. Alright. Coaching boxing. Alright. And in the middle of coaching boxing, we have this 8th grader girl. Alright. And this coach happened to say, "Nice legs," is all the parents heard. Parents didn't hear the context of what was being talked about. They were talking about squats, and they were talking about the form of the squats. All the parent heard was, "Nice legs." That's it. And it turned into a bigger issue. So compliments about appearance. Sometimes, you know, a coworker comes in and they look nice. Alright? Avoid giving compliments about appearance. You don't know how that can be interpreted. Alright? Coworker may feel uncomfortable. You might just be innocently saying, "Oh, you look nice." Coworker might not interpret that as that. Interpret it as that. So again, when giving compliments, avoid giving compliments specific, especially to appearance. So what kind of compliments are safe? What kind of compliments can you give that are safe?
Like acknowledging something good. Like nice hair doesn't like that. Is it okay? Like change.
Acknowledging a change would be better.
You all look nice today.
A blanket compliment would be better. What else? What can we give? What compliments can we give that will not get us in trouble? Performance. You can compliment the person about their performance, about their action. Compliment the kid. Compliment the coworker about performance or action. Alright, but complimenting a person, again, this is a boundary not just for peers, not just for students, but for all. It's a boundary you need to watch. Alright, when you are giving compliments, never give it in appearance. Instead, give it either blanket, skill, performance. What else? What else are safe ways to compliment someone?
So if it's like a new shirt that they're wearing, or is it, oh, that's it. Is that a new shirt? Yes, no, oh, that's awesome. So it's very general, it's not.
General compliments about very specific things, even that, and that's why I said it's not a do not, even that
Borderline.
is borderline. Right? It's easy for a person to interpret where you're looking at and what you're looking at, and why you even gave the compliment about what they're wearing in the first place. Alright, so again, in general, compliments about appearances should be avoided. Alright? Because again, I recognize where some of us are friends, we hang out. Alright, if you have a friend, alright, and you are in the safety of friends, sure, again, that's fine, that is up to you. But remember that the moment, and remember, here's the other thing, when we talk about harassment, we are going to empower the bystander. Alright, in a harassment situation, the best kind of training is not the training that teaches you victim and perpetrator. It's a training that teaches you bystander. So remember the power of the bystander. You might be giving a compliment to someone that you're very familiar with, and that someone is extremely familiar with you. But there might be a bystander who does not interpret it the same way. Now, my hope is in this organization, alright, instead of filing a complaint right away, we remember our training yesterday about honor. Right? And we, instead, if we're the bystander, that we confront that person instead. Hey, that compliment you gave to so-and-so, I felt uncomfortable about that. Can you explain what that is? But at the end of the day, again, you are trusting somebody else, all right, with your own employability, all right, at this organization. So remember that when it comes to compliments.
A good example of that too is with Kenji. We all know he's my son, but when after-school program's on or here in this building, we do not have any type of affectionate embrace or, he's a
Side
student
hug.
here. Because if a community member's here and I go and hug him, they don't know he's my son. They just think he's a student. So if you have family members here too, you will never see me and Jensen have any PDA here because community members do not know that we're married. So if you have family here as well, you don't want to do that. You don't want to show any of that as well with your family members, just because of the appearance of.
Yes. What else are some unavoidable interactions that happen? Whether with kids, with peers, and it probably already happened here, so we mentioned compliments, right? We mentioned just, some other things. What other things happen? You can't avoid them, and they just, and can be risky.
I've been in rooms where you're setting up a room like this, setting up chairs, and a high school junior high girl walks in, and you're suddenly, in the back corner, there's a doorway here.
Sometimes you will all of a sudden be alone with a student, alright, not by choice, but because they just kind of all of a sudden appeared in that same room, and you are not in an office that has windows or not an official meeting place. Again, inevitable.
You
Can't
can't tell
avoid
that
it.
student not to come in. You can say, hey, you know.
All right, so in situations like that, what can you do?
Run to the door. It might be awkward, but it's more awkward to have a sexual harassment charge than it is to like be awkward and be like, hey, sorry, I wanted to protect this phone. They're usually more open to that than the awkwardness of all this.
Let's go for a walk
Or a run.
or a public area. Let's go by the door and talk to the student by the door. If you guys notice, a lot of teachers now, when students want to talk to them, they don't talk to them inside the room anymore. They go by the door. Why is that? Because what?
So they're visible.
It's visibility. Right? You want to be visible with a student, especially since every once in a while you can't avoid that student will just pop in and you are already by yourself. Again, last thing you want is for a bystander to go see the room and oh, it's just you and a student. Make assumptions. Student doesn't leave for another 30 minutes and nobody can account for what happened in that 30 minutes except you and that student. No witnesses, and then a bystander. You had a bystander who did not witness the whole 30 minutes, only witnessed you and a student in the room. Now, again, you're in a situation where you put yourself at risk. What else? What are some other things? We mentioned nicknames. We mentioned compliments. We mentioned hugs. By the way, may not have said it. What is the acceptable hug at higher ground? Side hugs. All right? Regardless of how young a kid is, get them used to hip checking them. All right? Just turning to your side and hip checking them. All right?
Out.
Yeah, get used to that. All right? All right? And sometimes this is really also for your own protection. If you're a girl, especially, this becomes more common. You have high school boys, they're gonna do it. They're not gonna be shy about it. They're gonna wanna hug you. And they have other intentions in mind, and so you wanna avoid those as well. Alright, so we mentioned hugs, nicknames, compliments, being alone.
You mentioned the bathroom. I know we had to do that this summer here, so that could be a bad situation.
Well, it depends. If you're following policy, then it shouldn't be. But if you are taking them to the bathroom and you're inside the bathroom with them, definitely a bad situation. Again, it goes back to public visibility, right? Being able to take them to the bathroom, walk them, and staying outside the bathroom. And making sure that it's visible. I am outside. I am not in the bathroom with a kid. Alright, this is the reason why adults should not be using kids' restrooms. Alright, especially here. We have the kitchen area, if you have an emergency within the area, or the office. Follow that even at your school. Your school may be a little different, but for your own safety, always use staff bathroom. Never use student bathrooms. What else?
Sharing personal opinions like politics.
Conversations that involve personal opinions, such as politics, dating, gender, any of those kind of conversations. Again, we're not saying don't do, we're saying it's risky. Right? You have to remember that your conversations with the kids is again subject to interpretation of the kid and the bystander. The last thing you want is a bystander accusing you of indoctrinating a kid. Alright? Conversations about religion can be extremely dangerous. Alright? And again, those are things that you gotta really be avoiding. What else? What other interactions can be very, very risky?
Social media.
Social media. If you go into our policy, we have an entire policy on social media. Alright, this is the definitely do not do. You do not friend students without permission from your director. And usually your director, not manager, but your director will actually typically talk to me before you're even allowed to do that. If you are a volunteer, you're not even allowed to do it, period. Alright? Now, kids may get offended and whatever. Find your own way to explain to them why. Alright, secondly, the other reason we don't want you to friend kids is because once you post something there, alright, kids can now hold that against you. It is now public, you are no longer protected. Whatever rights you think you have, once you post it on the internet, it is now pretty much public. Alright, so if you have, public opinion and stuff like that, that's now public. And guess what? Even if you delete that comment, it can be found. Alright?
Also with that, the things that other people post, they assume that you agree with. So they look at you as being, when you're telling them to do better in certain areas, they see other people kind of address that same thing, and they're like, oh, you're fine.
Exactly.
And it can cause a strain within the relationship with the students if you're not engaging them on social media. They're like, well, why aren't you liking my post? Why aren't you liking this? And that goes into their
Social media causes more problem between you and a peer. Keenan.
Yeah, well, like, and also kind of going out like pictures. Like, I had a lot of kids come out to me this summer and like ask us to take a picture with them, and so I just kind of had to say like, like a really silly excuse, like a funny one, like, oh, I don't look good, or oh, I don't want to be like, that kind of thing. And because I think it's obviously kind of everybody has already touched on it, but just having that any picture with a kid or anybody that's not a family member on your phone, someone sees that, like,
Absolutely. This is why, again, you need to be careful about social media and what you're sharing in there. And then the other thing, even if you don't have friends that are kids in social media, in case you are not aware, all right, Arizona is an at-will employment. All right, in general practice, you don't want to post anything on your social media that your boss or your company may interpret as something to cause you to be terminated. All right. Yeah, right. There's a lot of, you can Google this. There's a lot of people who got fired because they weren't smart enough to not post something on Facebook, and their boss literally like, oh, I thought you called in today because you were sick. Nice post about watching the movie.
Checked in Vegas.
Alright, there's a lot of people who's been fired over stuff like that. The other thing, political posts on social media. I believe if you're AmeriCorps, there's an actual, right? There's a hatchet. Alright, so for AmeriCorps, this is even more important for you. Alright, again, political posts on social media. Alright, you really need to be careful. Alright, if you are AmeriCorps, again, it's not even careful. You're not, what's the rule?
As long as you don't identify yourself as an AmeriCorps member in your Facebook, you could put whatever, but if you do identify as an AmeriCorps member, which includes if you have a tag photo wearing AmeriCorps gear, then you are bound by the hashtag, and that limits a lot of the photos.
So remember that. And then for my staff, remember that whatever you post, alright, especially for an organization like us that is now, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to put it, is now on the eye of the public. Alright, whatever you post can be interpreted as the opinion of the organization. So you want to be careful about that. Like I said, there is an entire policy regarding social media.
I have a phrase that we can post on your social media, like especially Twitter. If you're active on Twitter and your profile, because some people will post, "This is what I do at this place," but this profile is my opinions. I can give you that language.
There is a language for people that work here that you can put in there to protect you. But yes, social media is another inevitable, about 10 years ago, this wouldn't be part of the training or even mentioned, but, it's near impossible to not run into social media with the way we work. Again, When it comes to boundaries with social media between you and members, you should avoid it. 100%. Avoid having kids, parents, anybody who take advantage of our services. Within peers, that's up to you. All right, I'm going to say that right now. You are under no obligation to friend any of your peers here. I know people that make 2 profiles, personal profile and a professional profile. All right, you are under no obligation. Just remember that. All right, and nobody should get offended if you're not friended on Facebook by a peer here. All right, because if you want to keep your life, whatever you do, whatever wild things you do on your social media, to you, keep it that way. All right, when it comes to the community members, again, you are under no obligation to friend any community member on social media. All right, what else are some common things that can happen that are risky that you can't avoid?
De-escalation should be very sometimes. Or like, especially as my team member. Or like mindful stream from time to stream. It doesn't even have to be de-escalation, but just one time.
Any one-on-one time you're doing with a kid is a potential risk for you.
When you have to carry the student out.
Any form of de-escalation. Anytime you're working with a kid on behaviors. Alright, it is not that hard for a kid to say, Mr. Rio told me to do this. Alright? And then now, whatever it is they did, they now blame you. Alright? And now there's all of those. So what is your friend when you're talking to a student with regards to de-escalation or behavior or coaching them one-on-one? What is your best friend?
Peer.
Huh?
Peer.
That's a good secondary friend, but your peer may not always be available. Notes, documentation, whether that's Asana, whether that's the map, whatever documentation, but documentation that is publicly viewed by other peers that other people can see and reference. Documentation is your best friend. All right, the more you do, it's almost impossible for you to over document. All right, your documentation is your friend. Alright, it is really important that right after you talk to a student, you document it. Alright, and then secondary friends are peers, having peers available. Windows, having windows available. Doors being open, if possible, is really another friend of yours. Alright, having those clear guidelines that allow you to do the work. What else are some risky interactions that, again, you can't avoid? Dina.
Like for the community dance, like spotting kids.
Touching kids for the sake of sport or for the sake of coaching. Definitely something that is gonna happen, but what can you do to protect yourself? Make sure you're not spotting kids when you're by yourself. If it's you and that kid only, I don't care if there's 100 windows, don't do it. Alright, just at that point you can tell the kid, you should be able to tell a kid, you know what, we don't have partners right now, I can't really show you. We'll have to wait. What else? What else outside of having other people with you when you're spotting kids? Always ask for permission. Don't assume that a kid is comfortable with you touching them. What else?
Speaking it out loud as you're doing it.
Speaking it out loud as you're doing it. Verbally announcing to everyone what you're doing. As you guys can see, I am touching his or her back to make sure he or she has an arch. What else can you do?
Be mindful of
Lucille. Let me get with Lucille and then.
If you have a kid or parents not informed consent, say that some of these things will go on and
If you're doing it at the after-school program, you automatically have that advantage. Parents are aware. All right, if you're doing it in a school setting, make sure the school is protecting you. Because sometimes the school will not protect you. So make sure those things are in place. Was it Dina?
Yeah. Be mindful of the language you use.
Being mindful of the language you use. All right, as much as possible, use scientific terms. I am just avoid words like, I'm just gonna say it, butt cheeks, cheese, and stuff like that. All right, you use the word chest. All right, I mean, because again, for those that do jiu-jitsu, like in date, all right, this is gonna happen. So you have to be able to name. I tell kids, your groin area, right? Again, you have to use as much scientific, non-taboo words as possible. And you have to make it as less malicious as you can. So I work with little kids all the way to older kids, and I use scientific words. All right? You can't use slang, right, for body parts. Use proper terms. What else? What else can you do to protect yourself when it comes to spotting kids? Making it a common experience. Do not just pick one kid that you're constantly spotting. Alright? I will even get suspicious at that point. Alright? I'm serious. Like, why are you always only spotting that one kid? Right? You should be spotting everybody. It's a common experience.
Also, like, if you have like teachers with you, to teach them first how to spot before they actually spot.
Teaching, and I would add to that, not just life changers, but even teaching the kids themselves how to spot. One of the best things you can do, like especially, for example, sometimes I'm coaching and it's an all-girls class, I will have the other students spot for me and demo for me. I'll pick a more advanced student, I'll teach them how to spot and demo for me. That avoids any appearance, any uncomfortability, that avoids a whole lot of issues. So teaching other people and students to spot. Alright? What other risky interactions happen on a regular basis here?
So maybe not here, but running into members in public.
Running into members in public. You can't always hide. That's nearly impossible. Remember that when you meet a member in public, remember the following things, especially member, not peer, but member, especially minors. Remember the following things. Number one, you are always a mandatory reporter. Always. Okay? 24/7. Once you work in the settings that, whether you're a teacher or here, you are always a mandatory reporter. Alright? That becomes really important for you to realize. Alright? Because you, by law in Arizona, are always a mandatory reporter. So when you run to members in public, that's the first one you always got to remember. The second one you got to remember is you are always representing the company when you run into a member. Always. Because, again, the best time to learn social emotional learning is when? Social interactions. It doesn't have to be here. Alright, so remember that. I have purposely now, because it's almost impossible for me since I live in the neighborhood, I pick weird times to go to the store. For a reason. Right? Because I don't want to run into members. I sincerely don't. Alright? Because at that point, I could be buying something. Well, I normally don't buy anything weird, but just in case I'm buying something weird, right? I don't want that member to go back to school and say, I saw Mr. Jensen with a, I don't know, keg, you know, with a beer, you know, 12-pack beer, or whatever it is they want to interpret it as. You know, it might even be like, it might not even actual beer. It might just be canned soda that looks like beer, and they're like, Mr. Jensen's a drunk, right? I mean, that is sincerely true statements that have happened in and out of this organization. So you have to remember those two things. You're always a mandatory reporter, and you are always representing the company whenever you meet a member outside of the organization. The last thing here's reality, because just reality. If you walk into a bar and there is a member there, hopefully there isn't, but a parent of a member there, walk out. Protect yourself. I mean, some of you have heard me say this before, so I'm repeating it. If you walk into a bar and there's a parent of a member there, just walk out, pick a different bar. Alright? For your own protection.
Even if they like work here and they have a radio parent? Like if I run us out of Sally.
That's fear. At that point, it's a fear. Are we saying that has happened already? Are we giving real life examples now? Alright? This gets really weird too, and again, these are realities. You know, for example, if you're part of an AA group and there's a parent of a member there, you know, that becomes weird. So you actually want to change groups. Again, to protect yourself. Alright, because again, there are just some things that you have to protect yourself in. Alright, it becomes weird, but again, these are the things that you have to remember. You're always a mandatory reporter. So for example, this is where it gets tricky. You're in a restaurant, and you know, parent of a member walks in, and a member, and you witness parent punch the student square in the eye. But depends on the zip.
And you get jealous.
You get jealous. Guess what? Alright, mandatory reporter. Alright, you are a mandatory reporter. Even though that did not happen at work, if somebody, here's what's gonna happen. Let me tell you how serious this is. Somebody there knows that you work for the school, and somebody says, hey, this happened there, and so was there. How come that was not reported? You are now in danger. Alright?
Oh, okay, so let's just say that that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, like, what exactly do you do in that moment? Do you step in and be like, whoa, what's going on? Call the cops?
You absolutely are under no obligation to step in. You are only under obligation to report. So you have to report it to the to DCS. You have to report it, but you are under no obligation to step in. Now, you know, if you're a good human being and a good human citizen, please do step in, right? As long as you're safe first. Call the cops. You know, stepping in doesn't mean, you know, using your body as a body shield. You know, call the cops. Do what you need to do. All right? But again, your legal obligation is to report it. That is your legal obligation.
So, like, let's say like that happens, as they're leaving, you walk in. So it's like that. So the kid comes to work, or comes to the program the next day, and comes up to the staff members like, "Oh, my dad hit me in the bathroom, but this person was there, but really, you weren't there to witness it. You were just there to premises."
Okay, if you weren't there to witness this, then you're fine.
But then if they bring it up,
Yeah, that's different. But if you witness it, you now have legal obligation to do this. Lucille.
Situation, first day of school, counterpart and I had lunch at American Eats.
Mm-hmm.
And the 13-year-old was running the house register, and my colleague said, lunch in school, and my dad said he was going to ask me to tell them to ask him. So, first day of school, and then I looked, there was a little brother who was about 9 or 10 that was also hanging out.
Yeah, you have a legal obligation to report that.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I don't even know that's the name of the restaurant.
So, in that circumstance, she doesn't know the names of the students, and how is she able to report them?
Then what will happen is DCS will dismiss it.
Again, it's not our call to determine what they do with the information. Again, we have our role, they have their role.
Yeah.
So we are bound to report, they're bound to investigate.
Do what they need to do. But you are bound to report it.
Because they'll ask you which restaurant was it at, what was he doing at the time, And then once you report it, your hands are done.
Your hands are done.
The reason why they want you to report it is because, let's say that student is under the age of working as well. They go and investigate. They're like, oh yeah, well I saw Miss Lucille. She was in here the other day and she saw me and she didn't say anything about it. Lawsuit. Lawsuit right there. Because you could have been protecting him months before the investigation went. So that it changed when all the teachers were not reporting stuff. And then when they got in trouble, they're saying, oh, well, Miss So-and-so knows about it. I told her 6 weeks ago. That teacher was getting arrested and fined at the same time because she didn't report it, because of mandated reporting. So you just want to be very careful.
Alexis.
Make sure not to report anonymously, because that's an option too, right? To make the username. You can report anonymously.
Yeah, it would always be safer to report and let them know who you are. Always. Yeah.
No, your name's not on the report or anything, but in case they have any questioning and stuff.
Yeah. And plus again, that protects you from legal liabilities. Cheryl.
I think another way to protect yourself, if you do report, always let your manager know.
Oh yeah.
That way you can always have a.
That's your friend. And by the way, let me just, people don't really recognize how important this part is. When you work in a social work school, you're a mandated reporter 24/7. That's not just on members. All right, so if you have family, all right, and you witness that, unfortunately, all right, you have to make it clear to your family members. Before you do anything in front of me, to your child, I want to let you know I am a mandated reporter. Because guess what? Even that, you have a legal liability. Alright, so I just want to make that very, very clear that once you work here, you are always a mandated reporter.
For the front office, if someone walks in off the street holding a baby, the baby's black and blue, you need to report that. You need to let your director know. So it's not just mandating reporting on our members, but if, let's say, mom walks in with the baby and it's the little sibling, but they don't attend higher ground, and that baby looks abused, malnourished, whatever, you still have to report that. We're mandated reporters on all children.
Alright, that's why I said that. You know, even with your family members, you are a mandated reporter. Once you do this work, once you're a teacher, once you do this kind of work, you are always a mandated reporter. Questions about that part? We'll get two more. What are some other common things that happen that are risky? Transportation. As a general rule, do not transport kids in your personal vehicle at any time. And let me tell you how difficult this can get. You're driving on your way to a school site. You see so-and-so walking. And it's raining. Alright? And you want to be a good Samaritan. Alright? I'm going to be very real with you. Don't even. If you put that kid in your car, you are now taking on personal liability, and you are also now taking on company liability. Alright, the moment that kid is in your car, you have now taken on a bunch of unnecessary risk on top of that kid potentially accusing you of 100 other things. Alright, while you were alone in the car, not visible to public because it's your car, and that kid can all of a sudden ditch class, and then he said, oh, well, Mr. Hunts gave me a ride, and 2 hours later, I still haven't made it to school. Now, you don't know what other stories can be construed from that. So, transportation. Andy.
If you're in the van, I know I'm going with the grade and these, when they go in the van, you may get asked, hey, can you go with me? Because there needs to be a second person. A, so the person can drive undistracted. And second will be to monitor the kids. But third is just for the accountability. Last year, when you pick up, I was gonna get 3 kids. So, the first 2 were at the same school, so I was good to go. And then the third was in separate. I picked up the first 2 kids, and they told me, oh, they're not going. I didn't have the second purse with me because I was told I'm getting all 3 kids. 2 of them canceled, so the third one, so now I'm stuck with just me and this other kid. So I'm literally at the kid's school, don't get the car yet, calling Jansen, how do you want me to handle this? I can leave him here, but the kid's parent was working with a big mess. So it was a matter, I texted, I'm leaving with, child sat in the back seat, came back. In fact, on the way over there, I think I called the kid's parents, let them know what was going on. It was a whole big CYA thing. And I found that second driver wouldn't have been an issue. But my plan was, oh, well, I'm going to have these 2, plus this one that gives me 3. They sit in the back, I'm good to go. It all fell apart, and I was hosed in the end, and it was because of poor planning on my fault, thinking that I had things covered. But under no circumstances do you not take a partner with you, no matter how inconvenient it is.
And that's why, as much as possible, avoid transporting kids in your personal vehicle. Right? It's just, like I said. Now, and here's the other part. What happens if you get into an accident? And that kid is there. Guess what? Not being mean, we will drop you. That is not going to be on us. Because we have clear policies that state you shouldn't do it. You did it. Parent wants to sue, they can now personally sue. That's how that works. So again, don't be the good Samaritan. You see a kid walking, unfortunately, I wish we didn't live in this time and place, but we live in this time and place where people will sue. People will do things. You don't want to be the victim because you were trying to be a good guy. Like seriously, that's the last thing you want. One more example. I'm glad transportation got covered because I was going to name it if it didn't get named. Oh yeah, sure.
If you're coordinating field trips, you cannot be the only adult on the bus or in the school van. You need to have a staff member helping you with it. You cannot be, you have to go with a staff member on any transportation related thing. So even if it is a visit, you need to be driving with a staff member. Never use your personal vehicle even for home visits with staff members. Please. Yes.
It's almost always better, and here's the other normal pitfall for this. You are working at school. Kid hasn't been picked up for the last 3 hours. Kid lives around your neighborhood. It's on your way home. A better solution would actually be to tell the school, and if the school calls the cops, unfortunately that's their policy. Sad as that may sound, you're going to have to let that one go. That's just how it works. Alright? You don't want to put a kid in your own vehicle. It's the way the world works. Any other thing?
On that note, Andy and I were just joking because before he went and picked up the 3 students, I'd always say, don't go by yourself, take somebody else with you. Well, there's nobody else. It doesn't matter, Andy, take somebody with you. He said, no, I have 2 other students. Okay, go ahead and go. And so he was just saying, like, do everything Barbie and Jensen say. Just because, in the first 5 years, it was just me, Rob, and Jensen, and we did a lot of things that now are rules for here. Because we didn't know. Nobody showed us, nobody told us how. So we would do all this stuff, and then they were like, that's not safe, you shouldn't be doing that. Or, others people do it this way. And so we learned a lot by
Taking kids from here to Flagstaff in my car.
Let me just tell you how bad it was. Jansen in the parking lot of the church that we were at, in his little sports red car, he would every night make donuts, do donuts in the middle of the parking lot because it was a...
I was 20, okay, to my defense. I just got started with this.
Yeah, he had this awesome red car, so he would do donuts in the middle of the parking lot because it was a big parking lot. And one of the parents came to, it was actually Pastor Cheryl and Eli, they were the pastors of the church. They're like, we will never let our children get in a car with Jansen. And we were like, oh, they're just donuts, they're having fun, but we never realized that would, Yeah, the parent would be like, yeah,
Perception.
Perception is everything. So, yeah, if we notice that you guys are, hey, you might not want to do this, just know that it's out of, we did that, and we know what happened. We know that brother and sister will call in sick, and you're going to end up with just one of the kids. So,
one other common thing that hasn't been mentioned that tends to happen. We mentioned hugs, nicknames, compliments, transportation. It's along the lines of promises. Well, no, that's a different one. That's not unavoidable. If that's happening, you're definitely violating policy. But unavoidable is promises, rewards, incentives. That's unavoidable. Because sometimes you'll just talk out of your butt, and now the reason why, because that's that should never happen. That's on you. These are things that sometimes you can't avoid. So promises, incentives, right? You have to be careful. Gifts, anything along those reasons. All right? Those things are very, very dangerous. Why are they dangerous?
One thing, or you don't follow through, or other kids see it.
You give a kid one gift, all right? You now have an issue of perception with other kids.
bring 120.
You better be willing to bring 120.
And that's the same for birthday parties and stuff like that.
That's why we don't do birthday parties.
No, like when kids invite you to birthday parties, and like you don't go to it unless you're gonna go to all of them.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why if a kid invites you to their birthday party, you respectfully come up with a different plan. I have plans that day. I would love to, but I can't make it. All right? It is very, very important. Anything, promises, rewards. The other thing too, kids have a very, very good memory when it comes to your promises, but really terrible when it comes to their homework or what they learned that day. They literally can't tell you what they learned this morning, but they can tell you what promise you gave them 2 years ago. I mean, that's just how kids work. All right? And if you can't deliver on your promise, now you have issues with that kid. Again, that's unavoidable. Sometimes you will do it. All right? But these are things you should avoid. Things that you should avoid. All right? Is there anything else? That's pretty much the last thing that I really wanted to cover for sure, was rewards, gifts, and promises. Okay? So again, nicknames, term of endearments should not happen, and all of those. All right, we'll take a quick 5-minute break, and then what I'm going to do is we're going to breeze through this